Hello, welcome to the 28th edition of the Telusk Forum, an online video programme for everyone living in the Crickhowell area. In this programme, Alison interviews Gareth Davies from Tir Dewi, a charity that's helping farmers in Wales to cope with living through a difficult period. Kerry and her team have acquired a new shelter, and we go to the Rectory garden to find out what plans she has for using it in the summer to support the work with young people. Helen brings us a short poem entitled Keeping Faith, and we enjoy photographs of spring flowers in our garden. Morgan talks about a triptych of paintings that he completed while he was chaplain at Christ College Brecon. This is followed by contemplative music from Vaughan on the keyboard. Finally, Dr. Karl reflects on another proverb about the pleasure of winning. Enjoy the programme.
Hello, welcome back to Telusk. This morning I'm going to be talking to Gareth Davies about an organisation that helps farmers in Wales called Tir Dewi. Welcome, Gareth. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Alison. Nice to be here.
Could you explain to us what Tir Dewi is doing among the farmers in Wales and your involvement in it, please?
Yes, of course. Tir Dewi is a farm support organisation. So we're actually founded as a charity, and we support farmers and farming families who are experiencing difficulties in whatever form that difficulty takes. So if there's anything that they're struggling with, anything they're not coping with, then we go in and we can help them and support them with that. We are a small team in terms of staff. There are 5 of us working mostly part-time, but we have 60 volunteers now.
Wow.
And and they do various roles supporting farmers, everything from everything from a helpline right through to many weeks or months of engagement with a farmer involving lots of farm visits.
Wow, gosh.
By the way, I lead the organisation, so I'm in charge. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I hadn't realised you had so many volunteers. That's great. So if a farmer needs your help, how do they make contact with you, and how quickly can you respond?
That's a great question, because I'm so happy to give the answer. First of all, we have a free phone helpline. So we have a telephone number that's free to call, 0800 121 4722, and that's manned from 7 in the morning till 10 at night every day of the year. So that is pretty much always available. Also, though, we get an awful lot of cases referred to us by other organizations. So if a farmer is struggling with, I don't know, struggling with an inspection, then the inspector, if it was Farm Assurance Wales or something, they might say, well, look, if you're struggling a little, do you want some support? Can we call Tir Dewi for you? Or would you like me to give you Tir Dewi's number? So the inspector might, or a vet might give you the number, or your GP, or anybody else. There's a whole load of organizations that now know who we are, and they will refer a case on to us with the farmer's permission. Yeah.
Right, I see.
So that actually is where most of our cases come from, because an awful lot of farmers are reluctant to call a stranger and ask for help. So they don't call the helpline.
Yes. They're used to working independently, aren't they?
Or they're fiercely independent.
Yes. So do you work with other partners or organizations to support the farmers?
Yeah, very much so. There's other organisations, well, the unions, National NFU Cymru and FUW, we work closely with them. But also there's other charities, people like RABI, which is a grant-giving charity, so they can provide money for farmers who are struggling. There's the likes of the DPJ Foundation, which is a mental health focused charity. They can provide counselling and mental health support. And then we are kind of a third part of do you remember Venn diagrams in school?
Yes, I do.
3 interlocking circles, for example. There would be RABI, DPJ and us.
Yeah.
So we work very closely with them and many, many others.
Mm, mm.
I mentioned a couple, if I may. We get cases from the likes of Macmillan, because of
Oh,
course farmers can get cancer. The
yes.
Stroke Association, farmers can have a stroke.
Oh,
Even Arthritis Care have
oh,
contacted us for farmers who are really, really struggling with arthritis.
mm, mm. Yes, yes. Gosh. So how are you funded, Gareth?
Not enough.
Ah.
No, in the main, we have funding from grant awarding bodies. So we have 3 funding partners right now. The National Lottery Community Fund have been very supportive. The Prince's Countryside Fund, one of Prince of Wales's charities, have been hugely supportive, and the Rank Foundation.
Mm,
But we also get donations,
mm,
donations from young farmers clubs who do fundraising activity, from unions sometimes, from Women's Institute and Merched Wawr,
mm,
chapels and churches, particularly around harvest time,
mhm.
and from individuals, particularly those who have been affected. Sadly, of course, that might include funerals. So we
Yes.
get donations as well, and that accounts for a significant portion of our support.
Right. Yes. So at the end of our talk, I'm going to put up your contact details. So if anybody wanted to make a donation, they could do so by contacting you that way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. This this sounds marvelous. I mean, I'm sure it's a great help for farmers because, as you say, they're used to struggling on their own, and there are times when they really need people to get alongside them. Is there anything that the general public can do to help Tia Dewi?
Yeah, very much. The main thing is about promoting Tir
Mm,
Dewi, letting people know, letting farmers know that we're out there, or farmers' wives, or farmers' children, or partners involved in farming, letting them know that we're there and that not only are we here, but all of the support we give always is entirely confidential. So
mm,
nobody else will hear that
mhm,
you're being supported by us at Tir Dewi, unless with your agreement we need help elsewhere and we can refer cases on.
mm,
But also, and this is really important, we will never judge a farmer.
mm,
Farmers are constantly being judged by others, and
mm,
they're so reluctant to ask for help because that invites somebody else in to yet again judge them.
mm,
We don't judge farmers. We help them with where they are, however they got there,
mm,
and whatever that problem is.
mm,
Our volunteers are in the main from farming backgrounds. They understand the pressures and difficulties of farming. The
mm.
last thing a farmer needs is more judgment.
Yes, yes, yes. And I guess things are going to get even more difficult with environmental issues and changes that are going to have to come about because of that. And so your organisation will be stretched, I think.
I,
Yeah.
I think we will, but if I may, just for a moment on environmental issues, everybody agrees that we need to take care of our planet, but the ways in which changes are going to affect farmers is, having now left the European Union, the whole of the government-based farm support package, if you like, is changing, all
Mm,
of it.
mm,
So everything will be new, and farmers will be assessed on an entirely new set of criteria.
right.
And they don't yet know what that is. So they can't
Ah,
yet plan formally and structure for a
right,
system that's coming in within the next couple of years.
right,
So it's
right.
really challenging for them. But
Mm,
also, just recently, the last couple of weeks, we've had a rollout of NVZ's, nitrate vulnerable zone regulations. Um, Unless you understand farming, you have no idea what these are, but they're going to have a massive impact on farmers again, both from a cost perspective, but also a practical perspective.
mm, mm,
And farmers are working so very hard under such huge pressures already. Another pressure, and more uncertainty,
mm, mm,
more of them will fail to cope, more of them will struggle. And
mm,
we're here to help them.
mm. Well, thank you very much. You've explained that very, very clearly to us, and I hope that through this program that more people will get to hear about Tia Dewi, both people who need support and people who want to volunteer their support.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And as I said, we'll put up your contact details at the end of this talk.
That's
So
really
thank you
kind.
very
Thank you.
much. Thank you. It's Sunday afternoon and a group of us have just put up this shelter. Kerry is going to explain what we're doing. Kerry leads the youth work in St Edmund's Church. Kerry, why the shelter?
Well, we heard about a grant that Pavo were putting out for community projects, and with the young people we haven't been able to meet with them because of social distancing and restrictions from the pandemic. So we brought this shelter so it might be an opportunity to meet with them in the open air but still sheltered.
So you had to have a project in mind as part of your application. What was the project?
It had to be something to do with the young people's well-being, and a lot of them have struggled with the lockdown and various restrictions that they've had. They've not been able to meet up with their friends, and one of their frustrations is not meeting with people. So we thought this would be an opportunity where we could meet outside, but be sheltered and socially distanced.
Good, sounds fun. So they will be asking people about their experiences in lockdown.
Yeah.
And are you going to record that?
Yes, we're going to film, in fact, we're going to encourage the young people to film themselves, and they will be asking each other, and we'll be asking them how they've coped with lockdown, and see how the discussion goes with that. Some have coped actually quite well, others have struggled more, and it's an opportunity for them to have a bit of teamwork to produce a little film. We'll only be able to do it in small groups because there's up to 20 of them, so we'll just do it in small numbers.
Right, and you'll use the film to show Pavo? Do they want to see that their grant was well used?
Yes, the organisation want to see how we've used the grant money. Another part of the initiative is that the young people have been writing to some of the elderly members of the congregation of St Edmund's, and they haven't met each other yet, and so we thought it was another opportunity for when people feel comfortable about coming out to meet socially distanced, the young people could actually have a chat with the elderly person that they were writing to, and they can support each other, tell each other their experiences of being in lockdown, and hopefully maybe lead to further communications and meetings in the future.
So that would be for the well-being of the older people as well as the young people?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm sure even when the project is over, there'll be many uses for this sort of shelter.
Yes, we're planning to use it in open air places like down by the river. Perhaps when we do some outreach work, or when we join in with other community projects like the duck race, we'll have activities in here. People can be sheltered from the wind and rain, because there are also 4 sides that we've ordered that we can put in, so that it actually becomes more like a tent, and there's a door in one of them, and so it'll be quite versatile for lots of different projects really, and also we're offering it to other groups within the church initially, where the elderly people may want to meet together, or Myron with her mothers and toddlers. Before we're all able to meet inside together, it will be an opportunity for people to meet up again. And,
Sounds an excellent resource.
Yeah.
And summer coming, and I'm sure there'll be lots of use.
Yeah, we're
So-
looking forward to it.
Good, so thank you. So all we need to do now is just dismantle it and put it back in the bag until the project starts.
In this short poem, I'm trying to reflect our communal journey this spring from despondency to hope, and from winter to spring. So this is called keeping faith. Keeping faith. Small hope in bleak lock January, yet hellebores break ground. February's snowdrops are candles in the green that lift and light our eyes. In March our Lenten fast of prayer keeps us close with God, till April and an unfurling and unlocking of Easter, joy and spring.
The Christ College triptych, which I painted some years ago, does not, I'm afraid, owe its origin to some moment of spiritual inspiration. Rather, it was an agreement between myself when I was chaplain and Phil Jones, the headmaster, that we didn't like the yellow curtains behind the altar in the medieval chapel, nor did we like the Victorian green glazed tiles that were attached to the wall behind the curtain. And that led me to consider painting an altarpiece to replace them. However, the moment I started painting, putting the idea into effect, watercolour sketches of details of what I thought it would be like, something really spiritual and prayerful took over. The triptych consists of a large central panel of the Last Supper, a narrower painting of the crucifixion on the left, and another narrower panel of the resurrection on the right. And I shall let each panel explain itself. First of all, the central panel, and I call this Drink This, All of You. The chapel at Christ College is used daily by staff and students, and the altarpiece was painted without any antecedent style or iconography in mind. It was painted to bring the meaning of the Eucharist, the Passion and the Resurrection into focus for those members of the school, all the students, all the staff, who viewed it at the daily service, and of course on Sundays. Being behind the altar where the Eucharist is celebrated, this panel depicts the central moment of the Eucharist. You remember, after supper he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink this, all of you." Jesus speaks to practicing Christians down the ages, including the current individual viewers, and not just the 11. The panel's therefore given that title by me, "Drink this, all of you." Judas is just seen leaving on the right, a dark, shadowy figure. Remember, he went out and it was night, John 13, verse 30. And those who remain round that table, and that table happens to be a table in the dining hall at Christ College, those are those who remain faithful today. And they are of all ethnic origins, ages and gender. And this also reflects the makeup of the staff and the student body. They've been painted in the dress in which they came to model for the painting. Christ wants us as we are, and not in some historical fancy dress, nor conforming to some supposedly appropriate pattern. Jesus, in the painting, is clothed in a chasuble as he remains eternally the high priest of all who believe in him, as the Epistle to the Hebrews tells us in chapter 4. It's to be noted that there are only 10 people apart from Jesus left round the table. Judas has gone, and the gap is for the viewer himself, the person looking at the painting, one of today's disciples, you or me, and to whom Jesus is still speaking these same words. Through the window at the back can be seen the 3 as yet untenanted crosses, reminding us that it's through the Passion, the process started at the Last Supper, that the promise of salvation, forgiveness and eternal life is bestowed. And so back to the panel on the left, the panel of the crucifixion, which I've called the last loud cry. The crucifixion is deliberately painted with a rougher texture, and that is to emphasize the extreme harshness and cruelty of the agony that Jesus is experiencing. There's nothing of the traditional setting of crucifixion paintings. There's nothing to distract the viewer from the sense of loneliness, abandonment, and horror that is being felt by Jesus at that moment as the victim. And he cries out in the words of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Following which, with a loud cry, he breathed his last. It's important that at this moment the viewer is not distracted by the traditional narrative iconography of the Virgin and St. John at the foot of the cross, or of the Roman soldiers casting lots, because it's through this agonizing moment of sacrifice that Christ's glorification is achieved and we are redeemed. The sky is black, turbulent and threatening. But in the distance there is the light of hope that is just beginning to illuminate the New Jerusalem on the hilltop. And so to the final panel, the right-hand panel of the resurrection. And in contrast to the crucifixion panel, this is painted in a much smoother texture. By dawn, on the third day, a new calm light, the light of Christ, is coming back into the world. Mary Magdalene has been left alone, grieving at the tomb. Peter and John, you will remember, have just left. She hears movement, and she turns. She fails to recognize Jesus, who's silhouetted against the dawn sky, and he reveals himself to her with the single word, Mary. He calls all of us by name, if only we can listen and see clearly and calmly. To hear it is the moment of supreme peace and a revelation of the deepest meaning of love. The grave at the bottom of this panel is symbolically far too small. No grave, however secure, can keep God captive. Equally, symbolically, the rocky outcrop in which the grave is situated bears a rough resemblance to the shape of a church, a focal point for today's people of God. And that really is a summary of how this came about and what it means, or I hope it means, to those people who sit in the chapel waiting for a service to begin and are able to contemplate on what they see behind the altar. Now, some people might say that in the Ten Commandments it tells us not to make any graven image and that there shouldn't be religious art of any sort. But in the early Christian era, one of the early popes made it quite clear that any means of getting the message over, and especially to those who in those days couldn't read or weren't given the opportunity of listening to someone preaching, could still get the message through art that is properly and spiritually inspired. Thank you for listening.
I set myself the task of looking at Proverbs chapter 11 and seeing if I could find one of the wise sayings to think about in particular. And there were quite a lot to choose from. And in the end, I settled for verse 30, which is another one of my favourites. That little proverb says, "The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that wins souls is wise." I like it because of the second part mainly, and that's what draws me into it. He that wins souls is wise. I find it a really precious challenge to all of us who are called to follow Jesus, that we should be fishers of men. Jesus promises that he will make us fishers of men, and so we need to be devoted to talking about Jesus to as many people as we can while we have time. To win souls implies a struggle, but it also implies delight. We all know the rush of pleasure we get when we win something. And it reminded me a little bit of times in my medical work when a good diagnosis has led to a successful treatment and a life has been touched with healing, and how good that feels. But as usual with the book of Proverbs, you get hooked by something and it draws you into a proverb, and then you discover other things to think about, perhaps not quite so comfortable and easy. And the first bit of this proverb I found a bit challenging because it makes me look at the fruit of my life. It challenges me to think about whether I'm living a good life, a wise life, a righteous life, and showing fruit which is consistent with that. And it reminded me that before I became a Christian, it was seeing one of my friends living out a good life that challenged me to think about Jesus for the first time. And I suspect that many of you are the same. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, encourages us to examine our lives in this way, to look at the fruit of our lives. In Matthew chapter 7 and verse 17, he says, "Every good tree bears good fruit, and every bad tree bears bad fruit. By their fruits, therefore, you will know them." Seems really black and white to Jesus, good and bad, whereas I realize that I don't feel like that. I feel I'm sometimes good and sometimes bad. I'm a bit of a mixture. And the words of Jesus are even more challenging because in verse 18 he says, "A good tree cannot bear bad fruit." And in verse 19 he says, "Any tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and cast into the fire." So when I'm thinking about my life as a tree and thinking about the fruit of my life in the light of Jesus' teaching, it's a little bit uncomfortable. Now, I can respond to this in a number of ways. I could sort of shrug it off and say, well, I'm a good enough tree. I'm better than some trees. And the fruit that I bear is, well, it'll just have to do. I could just say, well, I am what I am. Take me or leave me. I can't change myself. And both of those, I think, would be inadequate ways of really grappling with this proverb. Proverbs 11:30 promises something. It leads me to believe that a better life, a good life, a wise life, a righteous life is somehow possible to those who are seeking after God. So what if instead of shrugging it off, I press into it a little bit and I admit that I can't live this good life on my own? I fall short of this standard. What if I admit that by nature I'm a bad tree? What will happen? Will I be cut down? Will I be cast into the fire? Will I face judgment? Will I face condemnation? Well, of course not. The same Jesus who is so hard on me when I think I'm good enough is really gentle with me as soon as I realize that I'm not good enough and that I can't do it on my own. Once I have the courage to admit that I can't do this good life alone. He promises me rebirth and replanting, a new life with his power in me, enabling me. In Isaiah 61, there's a prophecy about the Messiah, which Jesus applies to himself when he reads from Isaiah in the synagogue. Very often, where in the gospel accounts, we only read the first part of the poem that Isaiah has written down. But if we read it all, it feeds into this teaching of Jesus about the trees. So Isaiah 61 says this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified." If I'm willing to admit that I can't live a good life on my own, that I don't have the righteousness within me, and if I come to him and ask him to forgive me for this, to forgive my sin, and to come into my life and empower me, then he will make me a new tree, and his life will flow into me and through me and help me to bear fruit and to be changed. The fruit of the life of Jesus in a Christian is manifold. In Galatians, Paul gives a list of things that we are transformed to be like. He calls them the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. As we draw close to Jesus, as we seek to follow after him, these things grow in our lives, and people around us notice that is what the good life is. And as we bear that fruit in our lives, so people are stimulated to ask us about it. What gives us the strength to live like that? And like my friend at school, that gives us an opportunity to share that it isn't what, it's who allows us to live this life of the tree of righteousness. And then hopefully they can choose that path also, so that we might win a soul, which is why